2025 SEC football is setting up to be a season where anything is possible. Let's talk about all of the possibilities right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And I swear, just as soon as I had the revelation last week that this was the best sports moment as a fan of my entire life, well, the Tigers drop 2 in a row in basketball, and the Chiefs get absolutely demolished and dog-walked in the Super Bowl by the Philadelphia Eagles. And you know what? Definitely going to have more basketball to talk about in the show, including the Tigers dropping 6 spots in both polls here that were just released recently. First, though, I do want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Of course, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I have to say, we'll talk a little bit maybe about the Super Bowl at the very, very end of the program. But this is Locked On Mizzou, by golly. So we're going to start talking about the Tigers. And I have to say, you do have to wonder, after a season, this is truly a new era for Missouri. It really feels that way. With Luther Burden gone, with Brady Cook gone, this feels like a truly new era. And who knows, maybe a new offensive coordinator as well. We'll just have to stay tuned to that potential news here over the next couple days or so. We'll see if Kirby Moore stays put or perhaps follows his brother down to New Orleans, as has been speculated many places, including here, by the way. But the question is, for Missouri in 2025 on the football field, is this going to be a rebuilding season or a reload type of season? And it's got me thinking, what would be considered a good season, an acceptable season for Missouri next season? I think I know what a great season would be for Missouri. I think that's making the college football playoff, going 10-2. I think that'll do it, even with this relatively favorable SEC schedule that Missouri has next season. But what is the bar now? I think college football playoff is the goal, but I just don't think that's realistic enough for Missouri at this point to say that, well, it's either that or nothing. I think a good season, though, really, I think Missouri has risen to the point where I really think 9 wins is almost the baseline for me. You get into 8 wins, especially as I break down the schedule here for Missouri next season, and it starts to get disappointing, quite honestly. And if you're a long-suffering Missouri fan, that might sound unrealistic, but quite honestly, the bar has been raised, and really this past decade of college football, so much has changed, and Missouri has been one of the biggest beneficiaries of it. So as far as this coming season, though, well, as usual, it is always helpful to look at the schedule. And obviously Missouri starting off as usual with an easy one. Week 1 against Central Arkansas at home. Week 2 against Kansas, though, is that ball game a gimme? Well, absolutely not. But quite simply, that has to be a win for Missouri. Not only because of the rivalry, the nature of that historical rivalry with Kansas, but I would say much like Kansas State, that game in Week 2 in Columbia of 2023, the way the schedule sets up, if you're going to have a big season, quite simply, I think that's just a game the Tigers need to win, maybe even more so than the Kansas State game, just based on the quality of opponent. So then Week 3, the Ragin' Cajuns come to town. Obviously, the Louisiana Lafayette, that's a victory as well. Now, South Carolina, Week 4. Maybe that's more analogous to the Kansas State game in terms of a real fulcrum game that could decide if you have a memorable season, not only a memorable season, but one of the great seasons in Missouri history, or simply just a good season, almost like 2024, which was, hey, a good season. Everybody liked it, but it wasn't 2023. And the difference was simply one loss, and yet it felt like quite a bit more than that in retrospect. So obviously South Carolina, a close game, a spectacularly entertaining game in so many ways, especially that second half. Well, the Gamecocks coming to Columbia next season, and they're going to be a really popular pick to make some noise in the SEC next season with Lenora Sellers, the quarterback, coming back next season. Dylan Stewart, a whole bunch of hype for the Gamecocks, I promise you, is coming. They're going to be a popular sleeper pick. So for now, I'll put that down into the likely loss category, just simply with respect to that program. And, hey, Missouri breaking in a new quarterback as well. UMass, we can all say, is a victory. Then a bye week. Hey, Alabama at home. I'll put that down into the likely loss category as well. At Auburn, Alabama. Now we're talking toss-up category. At Vanderbilt, another game that simply has to be a victory. Much like Kansas, though, not a gimme whatsoever. Heck, we saw it last season. Missouri went to overtime to beat Vanderbilt at home. So with Diego Pavia coming back next season, that's no gimme whatsoever. But obviously, every season, if it's going to be a good one in Columbia, you almost have to beat Vanderbilt, right? I'd say Texas A&M at home at this point. I'll say that's somewhat in the toss-up category as well. Mississippi State at home, got to be a victory. At Oklahoma, toss-up. At Arkansas, again, sort of into that, not a gimme, but assuming it's a victory against Sam Pittman until further notice. So, if we're going to break that all down here, I know I just threw a lot of results at you quickly, but here's the good news. I thought ahead. I'm gonna recap it all for you right now. My no hesitation victories there, I think there are 4 of them. Central Arkansas, the Ragin' Cajuns, UMass, and also Mississippi State. I'll give Missouri that one home SEC ball game. I'll put that one down in permanent marker, at least for now. Now, the yes, but I'll call that. I think Missouri's going to win, but we'll say Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Kansas. If you assume all of those, that gets you to 7 victories. So that's why I'm saying you got to think at least 8 or 9 to be at the minimum for Missouri. That's got to be a floor. That's got to be a floor to be considered a successful season, because then when you get into the toss-up games, these are the 3 games that I called a toss-up. Texas A&M at home, at Auburn, and at Oklahoma. You win 2 of 3 there. Now you're at 9 wins, and plus the games I put down as likely losses, South Carolina and Alabama. Again, those are home football games. Alabama has plenty of questions here. And by the way, there's a lot of upside on this Missouri offense. Much more proven than the Missouri defense, though I still want to see how the secondary looks for that Missouri defense this coming season. Some great pieces on paper. Obviously, they all need to come together, though. But that's the thing. That's true for just about everyone in the league, including the Alabama Crimson Tide, who are going to have a new quarterback who more often than certainly in the Saban era are going to be having new pieces, just like everybody else in the country. The portal era is a challenge and an adjustment for every single program at this point. It still is. That's why you saw a guy, for example, on the basketball court, somebody like Dennis Gates, to me is obviously a good basketball coach. Heck, he still had to go through some growing pains last year in terms of figuring out this whole portal process for sure. So it's understandable that all these programs, this new NIL infrastructure and environment that we're all in, the point is this is causing some more variability. And even more to the point, once again, Missouri, one of the beneficiaries of this whole process. I think at this point, Missouri, hey, if you think they're a 7-8 win team, I could totally see that. But again, if their most likely losses are Alabama, still working into the Kalen DeBoer era, South Carolina that just took an L in its bowl game, by the way, to Illinois, a game that Shane Beamer clearly wanted to win. They took that loss. They're not a perfect ball club. Alabama lost to Michigan in their bowl game. I'm just saying not everything, especially outside of Georgia and maybe Texas, is an absolute certainty. Nothing is running on full cylinders for the most part in these SEC programs. So if you're Missouri, yes, it's potentially a rebuilding year, maybe a reloading year, though, if things can fall just right. And after dropping consecutive games for the first time all season, Mizzou basketball drops 6 spots in both polls. Is that fair? Let's talk about that. But first, I do want to remind you quickly that when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started because there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback potentially, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And I really do love the live betting feature over at FanDuel because, well, it does just keep you invested in every single moment, looking for every edge you can possibly get. So if you're like me, check it out. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So after dropping a road game in Knoxville to the Tennessee Volunteers, and then, of course, the home loss to Texas A&M this week, well, Missouri fell 6 spots in both polls, from 15 to 21 in the AP and from 16 to 22 in the coaches poll. And I have to say, I think that's pretty fair. Although projection-wise, again, projecting forward, I don't think a lot has changed for me in terms of, hey, do I think Missouri's going to beat, Arkansas on the road? Well, nothing really changed in terms of the results this week, projecting for the future, and yet I think that's a fair drop because obviously wins and losses should certainly matter. I think it's completely fair that Missouri dropped those spots. But although, again, what really hurts is, you're a few possessions here or there from going 2-0 on the week. Certainly, at the very least, winning the home game there at the buzzer. Texas A&M somewhat stole the game, I suppose you could say. Again, I don't mean that as a pejorative whatsoever. I'm just saying it was close. That's all I'm saying. Could have gone either way. But the point is, Missouri was close enough. Hey, you could have won both of those games potentially. Well, then you're a top 10 type of team. But hey, those are the breaks. Those are the results. We're talking about basically what I'm saying is projections and trying to predict in the future is one thing. And yet for your resume, hey, this week hurt a little bit, especially that home loss to Texas A&M. Missouri had a real chance to solidify its status as a top 4 team in the conference, even just going 1-1 this week. And, well, they just frankly let that opportunity slip through their fingers. But just to give you an idea, once again, of those projections, well, after that big blowout victory in Starkville, the Tigers leapt in the Pomeroy rankings all the way from 30th to 22nd. And these 2 close losses did drop the Tigers, but just only 2 spots down to 24th in the Pomeroy projection. So really the polls and the Pomeroy projections for Missouri really about where I think they should be to be obvious. But obviously these 2 results are nothing to celebrate, but really nothing to be alarmed about. It's just there's no reason to panic. I'm just saying at the same time there is no reason to be happy about a couple losses. And on your resume, these wins and losses should obviously affect you, or else what are we doing here? It shouldn't be all just based on, well, the advanced stats say. I'm not really into that. I'm into the advanced stats for helping me predict the future, but in terms of actually ranking people and putting them seeds in March Madness, all that good stuff, I'm cool with it. Actually, the results on the court mattering. Now, obviously, some questions, as usual, about Dennis Gates' rotations. I shouldn't say as usual, but has often come up this season. Sometimes Dennis Gates' rotations leave us scratching our heads a little bit, but it's hard to question the results in the big picture. That's for sure. But one thing, with 44 seconds left in the ball game, I had some Missouri fans wondering, well, hey, why not try to go 2 for 1 there? Push the ball up, get a quick shot. Especially my idea, if I were a coach, I would just tell my point guard, just drive toward Caleb Grill's man, whoever's guarding him, do a little dribble handoff and just have him fired up as quick as he can. Because in theory, you could then get another shot at the end of the ball game. The problem is, though, 44 seconds in college basketball, that 14-second difference. In the NBA, that's probably enough because, well, if you have a timeout in your pocket, in the NBA, you can advance the ball to half court. That is a huge, huge difference versus college basketball, which, okay, say Missouri gets a shot up within, say, 7 to 8 seconds. 7 seconds seems pretty realistic. Well, now you're saying maybe Missouri gets the ball with, say, 7 seconds left, something like that. Again, having to go 94 feet with 7 seconds, your odds of getting a clean look at the basket that is a realistic make isn't great. I'd also point out that one thing, well, Marquez Warwick, he played as Missouri's their de facto point guard the last 10 minutes of the game or so, especially of that game. Well, not only did people, including myself, question him being in defensively on the final possession that saw Wade Taylor ultimately hit a three-pointer for the win for the Aggies. Well, the thing with Warwick is when he's in there as your de facto point guard, he's not a true point guard. What he is a scorer, and he can be an effective scorer as your lead guard. And I don't think that was necessarily a bad move overall. But I would point out that if you're going to try to go 2 for 1 with 44 seconds, it's going to be a lot easier to have a true point guard in there trying to execute that. Somebody with better ball handling, traditional ball handling and point guard skills, somebody like Tony Perkins or Anthony Robinson, of course. So that was part of the trade-off there, part of the calculation from Dennis Gates. I understand the desire to go for a 2 for 1 there. I really do. I just don't think that Warwick was the guy who could necessarily get you into your offense quickly enough to do that. Could Tony Perkins, especially with his big body, driven down the right lane and been a great dribble handoff guy for Caleb Grill to get off a quick look there? I do think that was definitely an option, something that Missouri could think about in the future, to be certain. And some listeners think that we not only could have seen more Tony Perkins down the stretch, but also Mark Mitchell as well. And let's also talk about the Missouri half-court offense, or perhaps lack thereof, coming up after these quick words. And listener Cooked, yes, Cooked, not Cook, Cooked, no relation to Brady Cook, says on YouTube, I will never understand taking Perkins and Mitchell out for the rest of the game after they got us the lead back. And I have to say, I thought I could have stood to see more Tony Perkins as well, even with Marquez Warwick at the same time. I thought, hey, Marquez got Missouri's offense going a little bit at times, just with his playmaking abilities. And Mark Mitchell, for sure, a guy who I've said recently, he's got to be better, especially against elite competition, finishing in the paint. Well, he finished really well in the paint against Texas A&M. I thought it was one of his better outings offensively, and I thought he was his usual versatile, disruptive self on defense as well. And I believe Mitchell got about 8 minutes in the second half, 8 of the 20 minutes. I definitely could have gone for closer to 15 than 8 of those 20 minutes. I couldn't agree more with Cooked on that particular take. And Rick, a longtime listener of the program, says Missouri has no offensive identity if they aren't hitting threes. Jack says Missouri seems like a team, if they can't hit threes, they are in trouble. Well, when Missouri goes 5 of 21 from downtown, like most teams, yes, they're going to be in trouble. There is no question about that. But I don't think Missouri is nearly as reliant on three-pointers as, say, Dennis Gates' first team was. I will say that. But there is no doubt that threes are a big part of Missouri's offense, but just like it's a huge part of just about every team's offense at this point, the only thing I'll say is sometimes when Missouri, especially when they have to play Josh Gray and Mark Mitchell together, for instance, Gray, who is basically a non-scorer, Mitchell, who can score, obviously, but isn't a great jump shooter, well, that challenges your spacing quite a bit. And just offensively in the half court, I don't know any real way around Missouri at times not looking a little bit stuck in the mud offensively if the outside shots aren't going down. Because when they do, it's not only about the three-pointers that go in, it's about spacing out the court, just opening up the entire court for driving lanes, for passing lanes, for everything else. So I do think there's a point to be made there, and I do think that Missouri's half-court offense is probably never going to be elite with this particular group that they have right now. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this team, not trying to complain or anything like that, but I do think Missouri's half-court offense is probably what's holding it back from being one of the elite teams in really all of college basketball. That's just the reality of the situation. And by the way, as I finished up that comment there, I realized how that might sound to some people. So let me be clear. I'm not really complaining about the offense that Dennis Gates is running here. That's not really my point. My point is, at the absolute elite levels of basketball, the greatest teams of all time, whether at the pro level, the college level, they can break you down in the half court one-on-one, usually. It's not just always with, oh my God, this beautiful ball movement and this Princeton backcourt offense and all that stuff. Don't get me wrong, I love all of that when it's working and everything, but usually at the very, very elite levels of basketball, that it's not always going to work because the elite teams play incredible defense. They're not just going to let you have whatever you want. They're not just going to let you run your offense, run your beautiful offense and get your perfect, first and second looks every time. They're going to make you get to your third, fourth, and fifth looks often the fifth look. That's what the great defenses get you to do. So my point is, it's not even about like what Dennis Gates is or is not doing. It's really just about the makeup of this team. And again, I don't want that to sound overly critical or pejorative or anything like that. I'm just simply pointing out reality. This Missouri team is really, really good. I love this Missouri team. And yet, I can still recognize that there are some limitations here that are probably going to keep it from being one of the absolute best teams in the country. That's okay. I can live with that. Again, love this team, and heck, if I'm underestimating them slightly, fantastic. It's going to be a great end to the season. Well, hopefully this has been a great addition to your day. Appreciate you for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So until tomorrow, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.